Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Set the Westworld on Fire, our weekly Westworld podcast where we discuss the plot and characters and everything going on in HBO's new TV show, Westworld. I'm Ryan Shepard, and with me today I've got Cy Cuddy.
Yeehaw, Ryan.
Woohoo!
Or should I say, I'll be back.
Yeah, actually, Terminator kind of is a pretty fitting analogy here. So yeah, we're gonna try to do this every week, which with every new episode of Westworld that comes out. And yeah, we're first episode here. We're kind of probably go a little bit longer because we're gonna be explaining some of the plot setups and everything like that. But yeah, we'll just see how it goes and let's get down to it. So this TV show is actually based on a movie that came out in the 70s called Westworld. And I actually originally thought it was a book that got turned into a movie, but actually it was a direct-to-movie. There wasn't a book adaptation or anything like that by Michael Crichton. And of course, he's famous.
Of course, the famous Michael Crichton, Ryan. Of course, everyone and their mother probably saw Jurassic Park, but
Yep.
There's also many other things he's written and produced, and unfortunately, he is no longer with us
Nope.
to actually see this creation come to life. At least on given that HBO decided to do a version of it.
Yeah, he's like Cy said, he's done Jurassic Park and The Lost World, and he also did Congo, which I remember growing up watching that movie. It's kind of like a campy sci-fi movie where they go into the jungle and there's this gorilla that talks, and then there's this, I don't know, eventually it turns into a laser beam and they're shooting gorillas and shit goes down like that, and Tim Curry's in it, so it's a pretty good flick.
Hey Ryan, it also had some of the most memorable quotes on the show. I mean, Amy, bad gorilla, and of course the great Delroy Lindo, stop eating my sesame cake.
Yeah.
I'm Monroe. Monroe, I happen to be your great white hunter, though I happen to be black.
That's a pretty good movie. I haven't seen that in a long time. I should probably go back and check that out.
Honestly, it's one of the better B movies I saw growing up, and I had such interest in it, Ryan, because it was an action adventure film. It was in the jungle. Excuse me. It had a numerous amount of wildlife, and then I started to figure out, well, what is the Congo really? Then when I got older, I read a little more about it and realized, all right, well, I'm not exactly going to be visiting that part of the world anytime soon.
That may not be an accurate representation of what the Congo currently is. But
I know Kinshasa is not the best city to go to. It's still a developing nation that has had numerous coups, but that's beside the point.
So in this version of Westworld, we have a Robert Ford, who is played by Anthony Hopkins, and he's created this resort, kind of like a Disney World, if you will, but much bigger than that, where people can pay to go back in time to the Wild West and actually live in almost perfectly recreated. There's a little town, there's the outskirts and everything like that, some farms and things, and they interact with androids that are almost indistinguishable from humans. And back to Cy's Terminator reference, very similar to that. And and
I'd also like to add, Ryan, they're also very similar to the replicants in Blade Runner, as well as another accurate description.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of had these kinds of this android trope before, where robots are almost indistinguishable from humans, and something's going on, and it may not be all what it seems. And throughout this first episode, we've kind of gotten an idea of something is definitely going on. Partway through the episode, it's determined that some of their programming may have been, malfunctioning.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ryan, it's heavily implied, or what they said in the show was that the is that each robot's received an update, similar to what you would in a game, like your PS4 games or PS4 system getting an update, or your iPhone, even if you want to even be more simplistic in those terms. But like just to add on what you're set what to give the people at home a better explanation, it's becoming more and more likely that, or it's becoming more and more prevalent that some of these robots are starting to malfunction in different ways. Some look like they're breaking down. One character looked like he was having a stroke. And then of course some of them are starting to gain sentience, where they're starting to think for themselves. They're starting to realize that the world that they live in may be just a fictional fantasy, which it is, obviously.
Sure.
But
So the main character here is Dolores Abernathy, who is, we find out at the end of this episode that she was one of the original host is what they call the androids. They call the androids hosts. And on the other side of that, the humans that come and visit are called newcomers.
Right, the guests, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they're the guests. They're referred to as newcomers in this fiction, anyway. And so the plot of the first episode pretty much follows Dolores as she wakes up every morning and goes into town, talks to her father, who's always sitting in the same chair. She always goes into town and gets the same sack of groceries, then goes and she paints near a river, and then goes back to her farmhouse. And at least the first time through, she meets up with Teddy Flood, who is coming in on one of the trains that are bringing the newcomers in. And they're programmed to have some sort of past relationship. So Teddy first recognizes Dolores, and then they meet, and it's like, oh, we're back together again, blah, blah, blah. And then when they go back to the farm where Dolores lives, it turns out that some bandits have come and killed her father, and Teddy actually, kind of in a not really soon enough, but ends up killing off the bandits, and unfortunately the parents are dead. But this is all not really, as the viewer, you're watching it and not really realizing that this is some sort of scripted event. You're almost thinking that it's like this is the plot of the show, but it's soon revealed after that this is actually something that resets every single day, and this is just one routine that the androids could have gone through that would supposedly entertain the guests that are paying to visit Westworld.
You're correct, Ryan. It's basically like playing the same level of a video game over and over. I mean, you have to, if you restart it, it goes back. It's the same thing every day, like you said right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, and then you soon realize this is just this whole thing. The whole world is scripted. They're all these robots are inputted with memories and have dialogue implemented in them, and it's all basically the same story, or at least this update or this plot is the same story. Again, being that it's been open for over 30 years, or at least what it's alluded to in the show thus far, obviously I'm sure that there have been past stories that they've updated over and over. But again, this how it also touches on games, Ryan, is to me, it's very similar to an RPG where the guests' interference with the hosts can mean that a whole storyline can change, because what we haven't discussed is the guests are allowed to interact with these characters in a variety of different ways, and obviously each of these robots have implemented dialogues for what they are, and obviously it was a very complex, intricate design that the Robert Ford character has created. And what we should also mention, Ryan, is that the guests, have free range with no consequences, meaning they can kill whoever they want. They can drink how
Well,
much they want.
they can kill the hosts. They can't kill
I'm sorry, they can't.
humans.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you're right. They can't kill other guests. They can do whatever they want to the hosts without any repercussions,
Well,
and that of course includes sexual intercourse.
I guess
Well, let me rephrase that. No legal.
supposedly,
Right.
I guess they can't kill guests, but I guess there's really nothing stopping them because the guns seem pretty real.
No, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. But yeah, basically, what I was, I should reiterate what I was saying previously. If a guest harmed a host, there would be no legal repercussions. Whether that affects the story, that of course remains to be seen.
Hmm.
And the hosts, on the other hand, cannot kill one of the humans. How exactly they would survive in gunfights or things like that, I think we're going to find out as the show progresses.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, you could compare it to like killing an important NPC in an RPG, and then all of a sudden you don't have access to that quest line. One of the important characters that was revealed in this episode was a character played by Ed Harris called they're referring to him as the Man in Black, which if you're a fan of Stephen King novels, you may be familiar with a character called the Man in Black. And he's presumably a human that has been within Westworld for, he claims, 30 years, which is suggesting that it's been since the beginning of the existence of Westworld. And he, at the beginning, he definitely appears as a villain character to at least Teddy and Dolores, in the situation he kills Teddy and kind of drags Dolores off, presumably to rape her in a shed, and that is his introduction into the story. So he's definitely set up as somewhat of a villain. Exactly what his role will play throughout this entire show is unknown, but he seems to be kind of, he even says it himself, playing a game with whether it's the androids or trying to figure out how to break the system. He seems to be like one of the core like troublemakers in what's going on here, and is probably going to work toward, I don't know, it's hard to tell what his ultimate goal is with this first episode, but it's definitely not to just sit back and enjoy the ride like the rest of the civilians are doing that are partaking in the amusement park. Does that seem like what you got out of it, Cy?
It is, Ryan. And I'd also like to add a point. I don't know if you agree with me on this, but it seems to me like the Man in Black, being that he's been there for 30 years, was really bored with the whole experience and wanted to spice it up with his own style of play. I mean, you could see when he's first introduced, he already knows Dolores and Teddy, and he already knows how they're going to interact. So it shows that he's seen this storyline many times before. Mm-hmm. So obviously, I think that's one sinister intention. And then, of course, moving later on, he takes somebody and basically tortures him or prods him into committing suicide. One of the hosts, obviously. So honestly, this guy it appears to me in hindsight that he has really sinister intentions, and it shows that, I don't know. I mean, at least in Westworld, it seems like he's more of a serial killer, or at the very least, a character like the Punisher, it looks like he's trying to enact some sort of justice, or whether that's being some sort of liberator, or a violent liberator for that matter, or what. But his character brings a lot of intrigue. And honestly, and we'll touch on the acting and what we thought of the characters later on, but this is a character to watch, and not just because of the great Ed Harris, obviously.
Yeah, he's definitely a major role in the story wherever it ends up going. And yeah, he's just kind of, he's very, it's hard to tell if he's that vicious because he knows that they're just robots and that they're not actually people, or if it's like he's some sort of demented psycho that keeps coming back and just getting his jollies, doing whatever he's doing.
Well, Ryan, I think maybe he's a mixture of both, Ryan. Maybe he is somebody who likes to fantasize about these certain things, and he goes to Westworld because obviously he must have some vast fortune of wealth
Yeah.
because one thing we should touch upon, Westworld really only applies to the wealthy that can afford going into this simulated world. So
Yeah.
it's possible that he's just enacting on fantasies because he knows he can do that, and because the androids are so human-like, it's the closest thing he can get. He thinks maybe that's sufficient enough, and that he can get away with it without repercussions. So I think he's obviously living out a fantasy of some sort.
Hmm.
But I mean, again, this is just the pilot episode, Ryan. So we
Yeah.
have a long
Yeah.
way to go to see what his intentions are.
There's definitely a lot to go. After rewatching it the second time, I have a feeling that later on in the episode, Dolores's father starts kind of breaking down. His mind starts breaking down because he finds this picture of something outside of Westworld. It's just a girl on a city block or something like that. But because it just must be like suggesting that there's something outside of Westworld that his system starts to break down, and I think that the Man in Black planted that there. I think that
It's possible, Ryan. But one thing I want to add, when he shows the picture to his daughter Dolores, oh, and by the way, people, technically these robots are only programmed to believe that. They're not actually the parents, and we'll touch on that later. But
Yeah.
when he showed the photo to Dolores, Dolores said that she saw nothing, I believe, or that she didn't think much of the photo, which I found very interesting. Why do you think that was the case? Could she not see any significance in it, or do you think she was hiding something?
I don't know. That's hard to nail down. I think it was just more of like she was programmed to just not acknowledge it. Like she did see it, but she was just the like deep down core programming was not allowing her to acknowledge it beyond that it was just a piece of paper there sitting in front of her. That's what I think was going on.
Or maybe she literally can't comprehend photographs. Because again, back then photographs were very rare, and maybe she just had superior programming. Because obviously she's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, models, replicants. Excuse me. So it's very possible that maybe she just can't comprehend it. Maybe it's not in her system to compute it.
Yeah, and I think on the whole, the acting was pretty good. Like everybody played their role pretty well. I can't really think of any particular character. I mean, there were some characters that I didn't like. Like I'm not a big fan of Lee, the one of the characters that's. I'm not really sure what his role specifically is at the.
He's the narrative director. He's the one who puts the artistic stuff. He's the one who implements dialogue.
Yep.
He's kind of the hothead of the administration side of Westworld. How he constantly has battles with another character. What's her name? I think it's Armistice. Not Armistice. Excuse me. It's Teresa. That's it. The one who's the operations leader in the show.
Yes.
We saw them going back and forth, and that's another thing to touch upon, because the administration, there seems to be a divide in administration on what they want Westworld to be. I mean, you have Robert Ford, the creator of it, who still plays an integral part, and he seems to have his own version, while Teresa and Lee seem to generate more of a commercial aspect. They want to make this a successful business, and they want to make sure that it's more commercially viable for people.
Yeah, and
Bernard,
the one that's head of programming, seems to be more on the side of Ford in terms of like he's more doing it for, I guess, the art of creating the the hosts as opposed to just trying to make a profit off of it.
I agree with that, Ryan. Bernard, played by Jeffrey Wright, who was brilliant as always, is somebody who I think sees Robert Ford as a surrogate father type of individual. He's somebody who believes, who's an inventor. He's kind of like, in some ways, he's kind of like a Steve Jobs, Ryan. He sees his art wanting to be perfect and wanting to be superior to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But again, obviously he views Ford in very high regard as a mentor. But even then, he has his suspicions. Going back to the acting, though, Ryan, I agree. I thought the acting was great. I thought Evan Rachel Wood as Dolores was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I thought actually she was the best of the bunch. Of course, she got the most material out of it. I thought Jeffrey Wright was brilliant. Ed Harris was superb. James Marsden as Teddy was very good, and you really have a lot of. And I should note, I think one of the strongest assets, Ryan, with the in regards to the actors playing the hosts and the series in general, is you really feel a lot of empathy towards them, because there's one scene where Teddy is showing, or is the guide to these group of guests, and the guests at one point are saying, are bad talking him, saying he's freaky, and one time they actually even suggested if they get bored, they'd use him as target practice.
Yeah,
I mean, it really and I think this is the show's point. It's really showing how humans, the purpose of humans going here is so that they can behave as badly as they can,
mm-hmm.
and shows the deplorable nature of them.
Yeah.
And
I think that's that's one of the things they're going for. That's for sure.
And of course, Ryan, where would we be without announcing the great Sir Anthony Hopkins as Robert Ford?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he didn't get as much screen time as I hoped, but I thought he does an effortless job playing Robert Ford, who I kind of see him as a mix between Walt Disney and John Hammond from Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think deep down he has sinister. I think deep down he's not as good as he appears. I think deep down he has a sinister role where he sees himself as a god, because even though he cares about his creations, I think it's conditional, being that they do what he wants. He wants to be the puppet master and control them.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if I think it goes with the old cliche, someone cannot be all powerful while also being all good. Or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, with power comes great responsibility in the same sense.
Or power corrupts.
Yeah.
If you want to go simpler.
And so does money, but because they're obviously making a shitload of money doing what they're doing.
Absolutely.
To touch a little bit on the acting, specifically Anthony Hopkins, I have an issue with certain actors in that if they're not extreme, like upper echelon acting, all I see is the actor playing the character. So unfortunately, when I'm seeing Anthony Hopkins there, he doesn't really have a whole lot to work with. He's kind of the character that he's playing is kind of one that we've seen a lot in sci-fi and other types of these kinds of like Sai was saying, like a Walt Disney like megalomaniac kind of character, and unfortunately, when I'm seeing the character of Robert Ford, I'm seeing Anthony Hopkins playing Robert Ford. I'm not actually seeing Robert Ford. Whereas with Dolores, with Evan Rachel Wood, I'm actually seeing that character. And Ed Harris hasn't been in it enough for me to determine that. And, maybe Robert Ford, Anthony Hopkins hasn't been in it that much for me to determine that either. But I'm finding that, who was Bernard Jeffrey Wright, right? Is the
Jeffrey Wright?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm finding that I'm seeing that character. I'm seeing Bernard. I'm not seeing Jeffrey Wright playing Bernard. Same thing with some of the lesser known actors as well. I think that's right now my only problem with the acting is that the big stars, because they stand out so much that I'm seeing them as opposed to their character.
I actually understand that, Ryan. And again, we'll touch on the fact that this is the pilot episode, and I think they're going to give more stuff for Hopkins. But I actually want to take what you said about him and his character a step further. I think it's a typecast thing as well, because anytime you see Anthony Hopkins in a movie, you immediately realize just by hearing him shoot his dialogue that he is, or you get the impression that he is the smartest person in the room. He's intelligent. He comes off as very articulate, and that he comes off as extremely persuasive. And I mean, again, that's really, I think deep down, Ryan, that's also really an Anthony Hopkins typecast more than anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, in the show,
I also think it's like him playing himself. He's probably a lot like that in real life.
Well, he is. He actually, I think it was reported that Anthony Hopkins has one of the highest IQs for in regards to current actors alive. And again, it's true. I heard he's an extremely intelligent individual, extremely articulate. And we've seen him play roles where he shows that he's smart. Obviously, Hopkins is well known as Hannibal Lecter. We've seen him in Fracture. We can just go on and on about the types of people that he plays. But every time he plays a role, you never see him playing, a drunk or the village idiot. You see him playing the most intelligent person in the room, or at least trying to be the most intelligent.
Yeah. And that was as far as acting, that's the only thing I had. The only other thing that I want to talk about is some of the symbolism that was used and how kind of heavy-handed it was, like projecting some of the things. Like, so one of the major things, even in some of the promotional material you saw, was like a fly walking on the Dolores's face, Evan Rachel Wood's face, and like walking over her eye and her not reacting to it, which is, very disturbing for somebody who's, I don't know anybody who's never had a fly walk across their skin. It's like, just not doing anything about it is very disturbing because, you want to get it off your skin because it feels strange. Right.
It's instinctive, Ryan. That's what we do if we see an insect come on you. We brush it off as quickly as we can.
And that particular symbol was used a little bit too much, in my opinion. Like we're kind of like driving it in, like, hey, this fly is important. Watch this fly, fly.
I agree. They did that excessively. You're absolutely right.
And then at the end, it obviously ended up being a major situation because the whole mantra or the core that's built into all of these hosts, these androids, is that they can't harm anything that's alive. So they're presumably not going to harm any of the humans because that's built into their core. And at the very end of the episode, Dolores, after her father kind of goes off the deep end and is replaced by another android as if it was just another day on the farm. Hey, I'm your father and I've been there. I've been your father the whole time. She reacts differently to it, and she also kills the fly that's crawling on her. So
I have a question about those. Ryan, we saw that by the way, we saw in the episode, we saw how all the androids are reproduced or are produced, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that also not includes just the humans, but they have robotic horses as well.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, are those flies robotic as well? And would they detect if one of their robot flies suddenly gets destroyed? That must be a bitch trying to put those together if they're actually robotic.
Yeah. There must be tons of them out there.
And I got another question, Ryan, going on the new father that they have playing Dolores. He had a sweet handlebar mustache.
Yes, he did.
But you have to think, you saw the guy's hair color was very dark, and I guess Dolores's mother's hair was very light. Wouldn't you, if you were in Dolores's situation, be like, Dad, how come I don't look anything like you or Mom? And there what was I adopted by some Sioux tribe, even though I'm not I'm even whiter than both of you,
Yeah.
or more paler?
Yeah, there's a lot of, like I had to rewatch that to pick up on some of the details. And I think that the show is going in an interesting direction. I'm a little bit hesitant to give it, a resounding thumbs up or anything like that at this point, because we're just one episode in, and there are some there are a couple of things that I felt were maybe a little bit too predictable or a little bit too cliche going in. Like it's not like we haven't seen one of these stories before where the creator of some sort of either a robot or a monster or something like that. I mean, it goes all the way back to Frankenstein.
Or a dinosaur.
Yes, specifically a dinosaur. And have risen up and conquered their masters or whatever the situation is. So I hope it goes down that road, but has a unique take on it. Like there's something happens that you don't necessarily see coming, or you haven't seen coming in these types of stories before.
No, I hear what you're saying, Ryan, and you're right. This episode was by no means, the best thing that was ever shown on TV. And obviously there were parts in the middle that dragged a little bit and maybe felt a little repetitive, but I'm still giving it like an overwhelming review. I mean, throughout this year we've had a lot of good television shows. Again, we've had The People versus OJ. We've had, The Night Of, which is another HBO produced show. So, again, there's obviously some good television out there. And even Game of Thrones had a very good season. But I think, and this is what a lot of people are saying, that Westworld has the potential to do for sci-fi shows what Game of Thrones did for the fantasy genre. And again, it has a terrific cast. They obviously can go a lot further with these ideas. Like it's not just a one and done sort of idea. And it really does keep you intrigued. And it's also produced and by high quality people. There's Jonathan Nolan, who's the brother of filmmaker Christopher Nolan. There's J.J. Abrams, which says it all, and I really think the show has a lot of potential. It's not for everyone, Ryan, I think, because obviously it's a very violent show. There's a lot of graphic sexual acts in it, and obviously the main theme is, or part of the theme is real life humans being able to act as horrible as they want to be without legal repercussions. But honestly, there's honestly a lot to like here. And again, even for Evan Rachel Wood's performance, which I think is, and I've seen her in a few things, is probably one of the best things on TV, and she should be for this pilot episode alone be nominated for leading actress awards. And again, same should go to like for Jeffrey Wright as well. And I'm sure Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris are going to get some award consideration. But again, I thought it was very well written. It was very well produced. And I think this is a show. And again, this is a show that's still going to stay with me for quite a while. And I'm really excited to see what the future holds for it.
Yeah, well, we won't have to wait too long. We'll be back next week with the next episode of Westworld, whatever that brings us. Hopefully we get some answers to some of the deeper questions that we have after finishing up this particular episode.
Sure. And for the people and for the audience at home, please give us your input. What do you like about the show? Do you agree or disagree with any of our points? Who are your favorite characters? And what are your predictions for the upcoming episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Sci, for talking with me tonight.
My pleasure as always, Ryan.
And we'll see you next week in
All right.
Westworld.
Take care, people, and yee-haw!
Woo!